Adama. The voice whispered my name in the dark, making my heart pound and my skin crawl. I was alone, or so I thought. It all started one quiet evening in our small village. The sun had just set, and the sky was painted with shades of orange and pink. My mother had asked me to fetch some water from the river. I didn't mind. It was a task I had done many times before. I grabbed the old, rusty bucket and started my journey down the narrow path that led to the river. As I walked, the familiar sounds of the village faded away. I could hear the crickets chirping and the distant calls of night birds. The path was lined with tall trees that cast long shadows in the fading light. I quickened my pace, wanting to reach the river and return home before it got too dark. I reached the river and filled the bucket with the cool, clear water. As I turned to head back, I noticed how dark it had become. The moon was just a sliver in the sky, and the stars were beginning to twinkle. I felt a chill run down my spine and started walking quickly. Adama. The whisper came again, soft and eerie. I stopped in my tracks and looked around. There was no one there. I shook my head, trying to convince myself that it was just my imagination. I started walking again, my heart beating faster. Adama. This time, the voice was closer, almost in my ear. I dropped the bucket and ran. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as my legs could carry me. The trees seemed to close in on me, and the shadows danced menacingly around me. I reached the edge of the village, breathless and terrified. I looked around, but there was no one in sight. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself it was just the wind or a trick of my mind. I picked up the bucket, which had somehow followed me, and walked the rest of the way home. When I got home, my mother was waiting for me. She took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. I told her about the voice, and her expression grew serious. She told me to sit down and began to tell me a story. Long ago, she said, there was a young boy in our village named Kofi. One night, while fetching water, he heard someone calling his name in the dark. He thought it was a friend playing a trick on him, so he followed the voice. He walked deeper into the forest, and the voice kept calling him. Finally, he reached a clearing and saw a figure standing there. The figure was tall and shadowy, with glowing red eyes. Kofi tried to run, but the figure grabbed him and pulled him into the darkness. He was never seen again. I shivered as my mother finished the story. She told me that the spirits of the forest sometimes called out to people, luring them away. She warned me to never follow a voice in the dark and to always be home before nightfall. I nodded, still shaken from my experience. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. Every sound seemed magnified, and I kept expecting to hear my name called again. Eventually, exhaustion took over, and I fell into a restless sleep. The next day, I tried to forget about what had happened. I played with my friends and did my chores, but the memory of that voice lingered in the back of my mind. As evening approached, I found myself feeling nervous again. I stayed close to home, not wanting to venture out after dark. Days turned into weeks, and I started to believe that maybe it had all been in my head. But then, one night, as I was lying in bed, I heard it again. Adama. The whisper was soft but unmistakable. I sat up, my heart pounding. I looked around my room, but there was no one there. I lay back down, trying to convince myself that it was just a dream. But the voice came again, more insistent this time. Adama. I got out of bed and crept to the window. I peered out into the darkness, but all I could see were shadows. The next morning, I told my mother about the voice. She looked worried and told me to stay close to home for a while. She spoke to the village elder, who came to our house that evening. The elder was a wise old man with a long, white beard and kind eyes. He listened to my story and nodded thoughtfully. There are many spirits in the forest, he said. Some are friendly, but others are not. It sounds like you have caught the attention of one of the darker spirits. We must perform a ceremony to protect you. That night, the elder gathered the villagers around a large bonfire. He chanted and sprinkled herbs into the flames, creating a thick, fragrant smoke. He painted symbols on my forehead and hands. And I felt a strange warmth spreading through me, the ceremony lasted for hours, and by the end of it, I was exhausted. The elder assured me that the spirit would leave me alone now, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. I thanked him and went home, hoping that he was right. For a while, things seemed to return to normal. I didn't hear the voice, and I started to relax. But one evening, as I was walking home from a friend's house, I felt a chill in the air. The sun had just set, and the sky was darkening. I quickened my pace, wanting to be home before it got too dark. Adama. The whisper was back, sending a shiver down my spine. I stopped and looked around, but there was no one there. I started walking faster, my heart pounding in my chest. Adama. The voice was closer now, almost in my ear. I broke into a run, not caring about the strange looks from the villagers I passed. I reached my house and slammed the door behind me, breathing hard. My mother looked up, alarmed. I told her about the voice, and she looked worried. She called the elder, who came over immediately. He performed another ceremony, but this time, he seemed more concerned. The spirit is persistent, he said. It has a strong hold on you. We must find a way to break its grip. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, listening to every sound. I kept expecting to hear the voice again. I felt trapped, unable to escape the spirit that was haunting me. Days turned into weeks, and the voice continued to call me. I became jumpy and paranoid, always looking over my shoulder. My friends noticed and asked what was wrong, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them. I didn't want them to think I was crazy. One day, the elder called me to his house. He told me that he had found a solution, but it would be difficult. I had to face the spirit and tell it to leave me alone. He gave me a small amulet and told me to wear it at all times. That night, I walked to the edge of the village, clutching the amulet. I felt a mixture of fear and determination. I was tired of being scared and wanted my life back. I stood at the edge of the forest and waited. Adama. The voice was there, soft and insistent. I took a deep breath and stepped into the forest. The trees loomed over me, casting long shadows in the moonlight. I walked deeper into the forest, my heart pounding. Adama. The voice was closer now, and I could feel a cold presence around me. I stopped and held up the amulet. Leave me alone, I said, my voice trembling. You have no power over me. The air grew colder, and I could feel the spirit's anger. I stood my ground, repeating the words the elder had taught me. The spirit's presence seemed to waver, and I felt a surge of hope. Leave me alone, I said again, more confidently. You have no power over me. Slowly, the cold presence began to fade. The forest seemed to grow lighter, and I felt a sense of relief. I turned and walked back to the village, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. When I reached home, my mother hugged me tightly. The elder came over and smiled, telling me that I had done well. I felt a sense of pride and relief. The spirit was gone, and I was free. From that day on, I never heard the voice again. I learned to respect the spirit of the forest and to always be cautious. The experience had changed me, but it had also made me stronger. I was no longer afraid of the dark, for I knew that I had the strength to face whatever came my way. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the heart of African folklore. I'm so grateful you took the time to listen to these powerful stories that celebrate our rich heritage and resilience. If you enjoyed this tale, please consider subscribing to BlackTales for more captivating stories that will transport you to the vibrant world of African mythology. Your likes, comments, and shares are also crucial in helping us spread these incredible stories to a wider audience. So, please take a moment to engage with us and let's keep the spirit of African storytelling alive. Once again, thank you for watching BlackTales. We are honored to have you as part of our community.